Sick boy, baby.
To our video session on a rather unusual subject,
That's good.
namely underarm services.
Underarm services. I can't wait. Let's do it.
Good.
Yes.
Winning, yeah. I keep winning, yeah.
We'll introduce the underarm service, using the service in singles, because even though it'll spin a lot and will disconcert the opponent, he can just hit it back in any part of the court and you haven't got a partner to run for you as well. So it's much more effective in doubles. But obviously, if you're incapable of doing an overarm service, it's far better than nothing. And then you just do a hard, flat service, which I'll be demonstrating in a minute. So the point really is that you need to hold your racket like this, fairly loosely, in that sort of grip. Why I say loosely is that you can use your wrist also to be able to impart spin to it. And I'll show you also a variant which I developed myself, the backhand, which spins in the opposite direction. Now, a word of advice to those who receive these rather unusual side spin services is that the ball does spin quite viciously, as you'll see. And if I'm serving with that motion like that, what you should aim to do is hit the ball not in the center of the court when you return it, but hit it in the direction of where the racket finishes. So by the same token, if I'm doing a backhand service like that, you should hit the ball more or less in that direction, so it'll go more or less in the center of the court afterwards, because there's very heavy side spin on that. I wouldn't advocate using a topspin service because it's more difficult to get it back in the court. You don't want a double fault.
Nope.
And the normal underspin service, which I'll show initially, not wouldn't, which has a rather mixed reputation insofar as some people believe it's illegal. In fact, it isn't. You don't even have to warn your opponents that your underarm service is about to be delivered, although I think it's courteous to do that, certainly on a social level outside maybe a major match. Now, the underarm service has been used by the likes of Kyrgios and Andy Murray, really on the basis of when the opponents are standing way behind the baseline because they've got huge booming services, and they put in, it's in effect like a drop shot. Now, it's not illegal because you can do a drop shot in the case of a normal play. In other words, somebody standing far back and you're rallying and you just drop the ball over the net. You don't put your hand up and say, oh, this is a drop shot coming, please be aware of it. So by the same token, you can mix and match your overarm services with your underarm services. Now, the real reason why you might want to do an underarm service, now we're not talking about the Andy Murrays of the world, is when you might have a back injury, a shoulder injury, or an arm injury, and you find it rather stressful and a strain to serve overarm, even if you've got a good overarm service. In my case, I never had a very good overarm service. It was adequate. Put the ball in play, I couldn't ace anybody. But for the last 5 or 6 years, partly for back reasons, I thought I'd change it to something which is less stressful. Now, that just to keep the ball in play, you do that. So you're hitting fairly low down and then using underspin or chop like that. So that's a very simple service. There's no side spin on it. And that's the one I'd recommend, certainly if you were playing singles, you try to hit that as deep as possible. Don't be embarrassed, it's totally legitimate, and you'll enjoy serving, because I never really enjoyed serving overarm because it was a service which certainly produced no terror in the heart of the opponents. This one's so unusual that it does, and people aren't used to returning it. And especially if you're playing maybe against slightly weaker players, they won't be able to fathom the spin. Against stronger players, I certainly would recommend you don't use too much side spin, but try to use a fast, deep service, which means you're cutting the ball quite hard. But again, the crucial thing is don't do it over here, which is maybe more instinctive, but actually make sure that your level's quite low, that it goes over. The easiest side spin service is this one I'm about to show you now, and as I mentioned, a loose wrist. You're hitting across the ball like that. That one didn't go in, but doesn't matter. Like that is the...
How do you feel about, doing, I call it tricky serves, it's quite tricky because I've played you a couple of times and I see how difficult it is to return your serves, especially when you're on your top form, because they just come in, it goes there. And so I usually make a joke with Bayo. I'll be like, oh, Bayo, Bruce has got so many tricky tennis. I don't like it, but I love playing with him. So it means people actually regard and respect you on that, because then if people want to play with you, it shows you are going to do something terrible to your opponent, and that is, I think that is the love of tennis. So tell me, how do people actually feel when you play all these things together?
Well, certainly I think it's a lot of surprise because they aren't expecting the degree of spin and they're expecting a conventional service. Although, as I mentioned earlier, I will warn I'm going to do it. I think it's just courteous. But the exciting thing for me is I enjoy and love serving now, whereas before with my normal overhead service, it wasn't really very good and kept the ball in play, but I couldn't apply much spin to it. But having been a table tennis player, I really enjoy using those skills again, and also from the point of view of deceiving the opponent. It's just very satisfying seeing them lunge for the ball and then it goes in the opposite direction. Now they'll work out over time which way I'm likely to be spinning it, but nevertheless it's fun, and you mix it in by the strength of the service. In other words, you do a few drop shot type services, just going over the net, so you've got to lunge and reach forward for it, or other services which are more near the base of the service line and they've got to stand back a bit more for it. So it's to some extent a surprise weapon, and it also, I think for the spectators, it's something different. They're all used to standard ways of playing, and this is something which gives them a certain amount of amusement.
Thank you very much. And do you maybe have an advice for people in the community of Franschhoek, and also because and tourists, let me put it that way, that comes down here, they play tennis, especially every December. So do you have an advice for most of the people that think they can't play again because of shoulder injury or back injury? And I'm sure, I know you've already said it in your introduction, but I think you still need to just advise them and just encourage them more with what they've seen today, that without overarm serve, I can still serve on the arm and I can still do a lot of things with my tennis rather than just sit down at home doing nothing or scared to go and play.
I think that's the point, because my game is typically a power game on the forehand side. I'm a very hard hitter, but this mixes it up completely. And from the point of view of people who come to Franschhoek, or any other place for that matter, who are older and maybe struggle to get their overarm services in, and they're double faulting, even if they don't have back pain as such, and they are rather frustrated by this, because there's nothing worse than, in effect, it's like friendly fire. You're shooting yourself in the foot by conceding points, by missing your two services. And therefore this is one way which is much more reliable to keep the ball in play, even if not using the massive side spin I am. You don't have to do that. I just enjoy that and I'm doing it. But certainly I would say that people now and again can just throw one in, because it mixes it up. It means the opponents have to come rushing nearer the net to try and get the service back. And again, different speeds of service, so you can develop quite, shall we say, a range which can put your opponents off. But the whole idea of the game is not just to win, it's nice to win, but just to have a good game. So even if your standard is below that of your opponents, that maybe they'll be so unused to all this that you will be able to prevail.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I mean, that's I think that is really amazing for people to hear that from you. And I really appreciate you coming this morning to come and give us this very, very enlightenment. I'm sure people need to hear this. And otherwise, guys, this is one of the great things that you can hear today. I'm sure you can't pay enough for this, because this is a great lesson. I have to go deep down to go and bring a pro to come and do this video for you, and I hope you've learned something about it. So now you have to get up. You can't just sit down at home. You need to go and play tennis, regardless of your shoulder injury or your back pain. You can still play. You can still enjoy yourself. So I hope everybody understands that. And the whole world, thank you so much also for watching, and I believe you're going to subscribe. Otherwise, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure doing that.
Thank you.
And so much gratitude must be devoted to Sean, who's really developed a lot of tennis interest in the children in Franschhoek, because the school children by and large didn't have much in the way of facilities, or more importantly coaching. He's doing a lot of this now, and so the new generation will be coming up to play tennis. You don't want an old man's sport. The young people have got to do it, and he's helping this.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. I keep winning, winning, winning.